What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and we are excited to bring you this coverage here on the McClunky Gaming channel of the first limited sector qualifier event. I'm Tower number 9, joined here by Grumpy Elephant, and yeah, we are about to get started with featured drafter Bobby Sapphire building his limited pool for the Swiss rounds.
Hello, hello, folks. Great to be here with you, Tower. We have about 500 players in Philadelphia sitting down, getting ready for the first part of this multi-phase limited sector tournament. They're going to be getting 6 packs to open, registering those packs, and trying to build a sealed pool of 30 cards that they will then use to compete over 9 rounds of Swiss today. The top competitors from today are going to make it on to tomorrow, where there will be first a 3-round draft to narrow down our pool of competitors to a top 8 for a final draft. That means a player who makes it all the way through this sector qualifier will play not one, not two, but 3 distinct limited decks created on site for the chance to take down the tournament and call themselves sector champion.
Yeah, this is an exciting format. In season 0, we were sticking strictly with premier play. So seeing some limited here in the tournament format is, I think, something that some people are going to be very excited about.
Absolutely. And Fantasy Flight, from pretty much the get-go, has said they are building this game with limited in mind, right? It might be called Star Wars Unlimited, but nonetheless, the way that they design their sets, the way that they've organized their packs, they want players to really dig into these limited formats, both sealed and draft. So getting the opportunity to engage in that format at a competitive level for a lot of players is a moment they've been waiting for since this game was first announced.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting to see how limited ends up shaping the competitive scene of the game, especially as we see more sets.
Absolutely. And other card games are known to host tournaments that combine limited with constructed. So we may very well see tournaments in the future that require Star Wars Unlimited players to be able to navigate both formats, potentially bringing in Trilogy, potentially bringing in Eternal. It seems like we are at the cusp of Star Wars Unlimited potentially breaking wide open with a number of ways to engage. Dare I say it? We might even see something like a Twin Suns competitive format. Who can say what the future holds for us?
Yeah. So this sector qualifier hosted by Star City Games is going to be kind of one of the first forays into a large scale limited event. And here in the Legends of the Force set, I think limited is fairly interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, one interesting mechanic to note from the get-go is players in both sealed and draft may choose any color of base, but they are limited to the common bases that exist in the set. What that means is every single player in our sealed tournament today and every player in both drafts tomorrow will be choosing a force base. The force mechanic, new in the Legends of the Force set, is going to be omnipresent throughout the tournament. And so as players are navigating their builds, figuring out what colors to go in. One, they'll be limited to 28 HP, right? No longer can you rely on the 30 HP bases that we've seen in earlier sets. And two, they'll have to evaluate every card through the lens of, does this help me enable the force, right? Force units all of a sudden will be at a premium. Or does this card help me use the force once I have it? Cards that enable you to use the force both in terms of leaders like Mother Talzin, leaders like Obi-Wan Kenobi, leaders like Grand Inquisitor, and cards that use the force, cards like Chirrut, cards like Talzin's Assassin, are going to be at a premium in this format because the force mechanic is in essence thrust upon the players from the get-go.
Yeah, and there are some rare bases in this set that people can potentially use, but only if number one, they're actually in their pool or a card that they draft, and number two, they want to do that. In this set, I think the rare bases are not typically considered that strong. And I wouldn't say they're gonna be universally spurned necessarily. There have been people who have played like, Obi-Wan Virgin's Temple, for instance. But even those rare bases are also force bases. So just like you said, Grumpy, one way or another, people are going to be playing with the force.
I think that's right that players are not going to be looking to use rare bases even if they open them here. For one, every rare base in this set has 25 HP, which means you'll be taking an additional 3 health cut from the 28 HP that you would get from the common force base. And then two, limited is a format that involves a lot of mediocre to slightly above average units smacking back and forth, right, trying to get your opponent to that crucial 0 health remaining. The common force bases activate the force when you attack with a force unit. That is a thing that we're going to be seeing a lot from both sides of the table, really regardless of whether or not players have tried to build their deck in that direction. Inevitably, the force will be turning on and turning off. When you turn to the rare bases, the requirements to activate the force become, in some cases, slightly more challenging. Of course, the green force base in the set, the command force base, allows you to get the force 3 times, no questions asked, over the entirety of the game. But something like the aggression force base, right? Deal 3 damage to an opponent's base. Not guaranteed in limited. Something like the blue force base that you mentioned, used with Obi-Wan oftentimes in constructed, end the action phase with a unit that has 4 or more HP remaining. Again, not guaranteed in limited. In constructed, you can design your deck, you can build your deck around that requirement to essentially guarantee that you'll have access to the force round in, round out. In limited, I think the much more reliable way to get that force mechanic on your side is just to stick with the common bases that Fantasy Flight has created. You know you're likely going to have some force units in your deck. You know you're likely going to be able to attack with them, and so that's going to be the most reliable way to get the force on your side in these matches.
Yeah, and I do think one thing that can sometimes be difficult is getting enough early force units to reliably get that force token. Where in a limited scenario, you are going to be a lot more at the mercy of your draws. And in draft, there might be competition for some of those early cards. I think the good, like 2 cost force units are definitely a relatively high priority in this set. So I could conceivably see someone using a rare base if they had one that felt like it could fill a gap where they were otherwise going to struggle to get the force, but we'll have to see what happens.
That makes a lot of sense. In sealed, of course, you are at the mercy of the cards you open. And so we'll have to see, particularly as we watch our feature builder, KTOD's Bobby Sapphire, navigate his pool, and as we see how other players have approached their deck building later on stream, right, how folks have navigated that tension. It might be that in one aspect, someone has a strong early presence, right, a number of low cost force drops, but that doesn't pan out with stronger cards later down the curve. And so ultimately, players will be in this sealed format navigating trade-offs, right? What are the relative strengths of each aspect that I've opened? Of course, you can combine two to build a deck. So which combination of two aspects is likely to give me the reliable use of that force with enough payoffs to make sure I can close out the game? Quick note, of course, we're unlikely to see anyone in this sealed portion dig into those single aspect decks, something like double vigilance or double cunning. When you have to build a deck out of cards you open on site, you are unlikely to get the depth in any particular aspect to support that narrow of a build.
Yeah, that's right, Grumpy. And even in draft, where you have considerably more flexibility, it's usually not exactly going to be easy to build a double aspect deck. And the payoff, quite frankly, isn't really all that good most of the time.
Now, that's not to say we won't see players splash either double aspect cards or even cards that are in neither of the aspects of their primary build. And again, that's because of the narrower card pool. Players are forced to evaluate every card they open, whether or not it matches the aspects that they ultimately go with. And in a format like this one, Legends of the Force notorious for being low on removal, cards that you can play from your hand that immediately impact the board, potentially deleting one of your opponent's units. You might decide, even though, for example, I'm in aggression cunning, I'm going to play my vigilance removal. I'm going to play my command removal because these are the only cards in my pool that will let me interact with what my opponent is doing in that particular way.
Yeah, I think that out of aspect removal is very reasonable. I mean, in this format especially, but I've seen it in other drafts before. Back in the Spark of Rebellion days, an out of aspect vigilance was honestly not a bad choice.
Vigilance, a strong card, more known, of course, as Tower suggests, for being present in decks that are not, in fact, double vigilance aspect than the rare double vigilance build that we've seen so far in the game.
Yeah, I think another card, actually, what I was originally thinking of, Vigilance is probably the most played out of aspect card in the game. But what I had originally been thinking of was actually Vanquish, which nobody plays out of aspect in constructed more or less, but could actually be quite good at 7 in Spark of Rebellion Limited.
Absolutely. And folks, for those watching on stream, we are going to do a brief reset as we get things going here for the Philly Sector qualifier. So we will be back with you in just one moment, hopefully turning soon to our feature player, Bobby Sapphire, as he begins to build his limited deck.